given the increasing amount of incredibly damaged testimony from the congressional hearings about President Trump's actions and behavior on January 6th, how do you see this affecting the midterms? And with more testimony still to come and evidence of his complicity, planning, and so many more things becoming irrefutable, his attempts to overturn the election, essentially, will we see finally the trickle of Republican candidates that are starting to move away from President Trump increase, if nothing else, to protect their own chances of winning? Thoughts?
Well, Dave, I think you and I know we've been around this Trump world long enough to never write the obituary of Trump. I think that is first and foremost just a lesson that I think if anyone has been paying attention, that would be a top lesson for people. And it's interesting.
Disagree.
And in terms of polling and the resiliency of the admiration for Trump, Harvard does regular polling with Harris, which is Mark Penn's pollster, who was a pollster for Bill Clinton. They did polling on June 28th and 29th, which was, right around the time of all of this happening. So people knew about it when they were asked. And they asked about admiration. Who's your top political figure that you admire? Trump was still number one. It was 42% people have a favorable opinion of Trump. Bernie Sanders was 2 points behind that in second place. And VP Pence was third place. And then Joe Biden was fourth place. So, and then I know there's been some polling in New Hampshire that put Ron DeSantis ahead of Trump in terms of a primary, but New Hampshire is notoriously inconsistent about selecting the final nominee. So I just think that for a lot of people in the Republican base, this is kind of Mueller 2.0. That the testimony that we heard, Trump himself said that he wanted to go to the Capitol. So that was not a new revelation. And then just other things that were said were, secondhand, and they wouldn't be admissible in the court in terms of that they're hearsay. And yeah, we should dig in and find out what happened. But I think that's the problem, is that this is not an actual digging in. There's no cross-examination of witnesses. There's no ability for an actual understanding of the security lapses that occurred. Kash Patel, who was the chief of staff for the DOD in the Trump administration, he has said multiple times that the National Guard was approved and Nancy Pelosi turned it down. So in terms of the security failure, that was a key problem there. But as to Trump, I think people at the end of the day, you have to let the people decide. And I think that there's so much partisanship. And yeah, I think Trump went too far on Jan 6th and leading up to it. I think he had some terrible legal advisors who were giving him theories that weren't going to go anywhere. But at the end of the day, it's up to the people.
But he sought out those advisors. People that told him what he didn't want to hear were jettisoned, and then he found the Rudy Giuliani's and the people that would tell him what he wants to hear. But let me just so before I respond, there's a lot to unpack there. So you don't think that it will affect candidates' midterm elections, and you don't think that it's going to result in much of a change for candidates moving away from Trump? So you would say no to both of those questions?
No, because look at the polling. That the top issue is the economy.
Well, there's other polls too that show people creeping up. But also, I'll say first thing, I agree with you mostly on some of that, but here's where we disagree. I agree with you that the 40% that are rock on the right or rock on the left, those are not going to change. But 13 million people, as many as 13 million people have watched these hearings. And again, let me just point out, there's no cross-examination because one of the most dim-witted politicians in the history of the country, Kevin McCarthy, made another stupid decision by not putting anyone on the committee. So typically, like during impeachment, people drown each other out. But because of Kevin McCarthy, there's no cross-examination, so a lot of it sinks in more. But my other point is the 20% of the people that are undecided, I think they can be moved. And I think they will be moved because it's become so clear now. Let's think about it, okay? It wasn't just Trump being influenced, but he approved, helped plan, and encouraged people to show up and the insurrection to happen, to be planned. He wanted to march to the Capitol with the mob, whom he knew was armed. I mean, I don't effing care whether they're armed. They're not here to shoot me, is basically what he said. And he wished Mike Pence harm. So I have to say, when Liz Cheney first said, either you're with Donald Trump or you're with the Constitution, I thought that was a little dramatic. But right now it's true. People have to make a choice. So are you with Donald Trump or are you with the Constitution?
I don't think it's an either or binary choice.
Of course not.
And it was interesting. Fox News brought in a former Secret Service agent who helped with a lot of these events, working for multiple presidents. And they said very often presidents would actually request to move those magnometers because it gums up, it creates a bottleneck. So he said it's actually very common. He said every president that he'd ever worked
those
for
people weren't
didn't
armed.
like to have to deal with them.
That's in situations where they
How do you know? How do you know?
Because I read an article on it. Okay, and by the way, I want to say, you, like the right, what the right does to distract is they pick some minor detail because they know they can't respond to the major details. So you retweeted how those hold on. You retweeted how those Secret Service agents had denied that Trump tried to grab the wheel. Maybe that's true, and it is. Cassidy Hutchinson admitted that was secondhand. Nobody's tried to recruit the stuff that to refute the stuff that she heard firsthand. That he planned and encouraged the insurrection. That he wanted to go to the Capitol with the mob. That he wished harm on Mike Pence. All these things. Notice nobody's refuting that. They're just focusing on he never tried to grab the wheel, and these guys are willing to testify. And there were other presidents who wanted to get rid of the metal detectors. As I said, that's like arguing which entrance to Ford's Theater John Wilkes Booth used when he killed Lincoln. It's a distraction. The bottom line
But Dave, I have answered the big questions multiple times. Like, okay, when you look at the language of complaining about a stolen election, there are so many other politicians who use that phrasing.
Yeah.
And then also he said in his speech, let's march peacefully down there. He did not encourage violence.
You know what?
He said, and then Liz Cheney was very dishonest. She cut out the part of his tweet where he said, go peacefully. She refused to read it because it was there, Newman. And it didn't meet her.
You always say how we both love the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which is you. Peggy Noonan summed it up right. That go peacefully was a cover your ass comment. In her words, it was a drop of passivism in an ocean of incitement. He said over and over, we have to be strong. We're not going to take our country back if we're weak, blah, blah, blah. That peaceful thing was
politicians say that all the time.
Cover his derriere. Come on, that's a classic response from the right. I don't even think Sean Hannity uses that one anymore. But the bottom line is the evidence has become clear. Okay, he tried to overturn a free and fair election, but more importantly, he's looking backwards. I mean, remember when he was running for re-election? Sean Hannity gave him the cream puff question: why do you want to win? What are you going to do his second term? He couldn't even answer it. He doesn't have one idea of how to move forward. It's all looking backwards. So, again, we will see what happens. I think things are still looking bad for the midterms for the Dems, but they're not looking as bad.